Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, welcome staff, welcome councillors, welcome to all those on air to the first Finance Committee meeting of 2024. It certainly is a big year for finance, or every year is a big year for finance. Councillor Methven and some, but every year is a big year for finance, especially with our long-term plan that we're embarking on for this year, and a lot of work has already been done on that. So finance, we're really ensuring that the ORC is correctly resourced to undertake all its functions, and we're also ensuring one of our duties as council is to ensure that the money that we get from our ratepayers is going and being used appropriately and prudently to ensure that the operation runs correctly and we're getting good value for our customers. And I better myself push the, well, that's quite a different tune now that I've pushed the button. Gee, that's going to be a habit with, yeah. So, with that in mind, we'll kick off this first meeting. And firstly, I will ask for apologies. I have apologies for lateness for Councillor Laws and Councillor Forbes. Also have an apology for Chair Robertson, who is at the Mayoral Forum in Invercargill, and Councillor Noon for lateness. Someone move in that direction. Councillor Kelleher, seconded Councillor Wilson. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. We have an agenda that remains, to my knowledge, unchanged. So could I have someone move that we confirm that agenda? Councillor Wilson, second Councillor Somerville. Those in favour? Aye. And again, I just remind councillors of their need to, on the declarations of interest, to continue with that good practice that we've been doing over the period, and to keep those in mind as we go through proceedings. We have our minutes of the 23rd of November meeting 2023. Could someone like to move that they be the true and correct record of that meeting? Councillor Wilson moves, seconded by Councillor Ware. Those in favour?
Aye.
Well, that's a good start, isn't it? And they're actually under actions for resolutions from the committee. There are no open actions to be reviewed at this stage. So we move to item 7.1. Which is our quarterly report, and we'll call on Mr. Donnelly, Sarah Monroe, and Mr. Mike Rossler to take And if I ask you, Mr. Donnelly, if your team could introduce the paper, and then we'll have questions from councillors. Any question?
It's on ready, so it should be good. Don't know if it's coming through, if it can pick me up. Let's
just move it across.
Yeah. Right, coming through now. Yep. The standard quarterly report. This is the only paper on this agenda, but it's the Q2 report. Follows the format that hopefully you're getting fairly familiar with. Difference from Q1 is obviously got the extra 3 months for year-to-date actuals, and we've updated the forecast. That's and both the year-to-date and forecast are showing that we're in and forecasting to be slightly better than what we budgeted from a surplus deficit point of view. But really, as with the previous ones, the cover paper covers off in sections the various reports that are attached. So it's really just a matter of how you want to attack it, and whether you want to go through each report or how you want to review it, because most of it, rather than us going through the actual commentary, whether you want to do report by report, and Mike and Sarah can cover off their various slips, or whether you just want to take questions on it. We're happy to do it either way, any way you want.
Yeah, I see I've got a couple of questions there first, and I'll just start with those, and then look, I would be very happy for the highlight package to be given to us and then go through report by report, if that's suitable to the councillors. But Councillor Methven, then Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just probably to help out here. I mean, it's, when we're looking at the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses, it's the variances that just need some explanation. So, you know, if you can take us through those significant ones, obviously subsidies, grant revenue, other income, and some of the gains through, just some explanation around those variances would be really good.
Will we wait till we get onto that report, or
yeah,
you come
I'll
with
just
that?
asking.
And they're in the report. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Paragraph 23, and the report is really clear. Congratulations, I think it's really well written. But paragraph 23, and this goes to the nub of the forecast surplus, which is great in many ways in that we don't want to have a negative budget. And that's great. And we've got some debt loading that the auditors have told us in the past. But for clarity, when we rate for some functions to happen. And when these things like 575,000 environment or safety and resilience is 389,000, we're not expecting to pay for something we've actually rated for. It's the lack of clarity of whose money isn't being spent and what the rate that we've spent there, why those haven't been spent. And some people will have seen an email I sent the other day where you rated this year for something to happen this year, and something that happened right to the end of the year. And it's understanding that transparently. So the question is, if we've got 575,000 or the 389,000, what isn't happening that we thought was going to happen, or was that always going to be a surplus carrying over? Does that make sense? And how do we tell that story?
Yes, it does make sense. So there's two parts of the story. So there's the financial part of the story, and then there's obviously our service measures. And the service measures are what we're telling the community we're going to do with effectively the money that we're taking off them, whether that grant funded or rate funded, what we are doing with their money. So there are, I suppose, the non-financial performance indicators that Mike's report shows, and then there's the financial ones, which my report shows, the front part. And some of those surpluses are put into a general reserve, and it may be that there's been a delay in being able to do it for whatever environmental reason. You know, the river is too high. That's quite often a problem with flooding, for example, for repairs on rivers, etc. But you can see in the report in relation to the activity financial summary, whether it's going to the general reserve or the targeted reserve. So the targeted reserve is where we have rated as a targeted rate. So we have gone out to an individual group of ratepayers, such as the flood schemes, the drainage schemes, transport, and we have asked them for a level of funding to provide a service. And if we're not able to do that, often that service has to still be performed, and it is just delayed either outside of Q2, and we would expect to catch it up by Q4, or it actually is delayed into a different financial year because it can only be done at one time of the year, and we have to actually just delay that and do effectively twice as much next year.
That's great. And I'm presuming from the wording of paragraph 23 that this is carried over for a year, because you're looking at it being a surplus at the end, at forecast surplus at the end of the financial year. Or am I reading that incorrectly?
So that's the entire council surplus. So that is our surplus that we make, I suppose, on our comprehensive revenue and expenses. So there are some things in there which are non-cash, like depreciation, etc., that would be going through. There's also gains and losses on our managed fund, for example, on our financial assets that we have, but some of that is things that we haven't done on our work program. And you can see in the sorry, I'm just trying to find you the right page, in the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses by activity, we do put commentary in. So for example, environmental, we have explained why the subsidies and grant revenue is down there, and is it, you know, there's these MPI grants for this period. So that's something that we're not going to get back. They just awarded us less financial grants than what we had budgeted in previous years. So obviously that's something that work program can't catch up unless for some reason we choose to fund that through different means, or they choose in the future to give us a higher grant next year to catch up. But the indication, for example, in that is that wouldn't be the case.
There is a smart, I suppose, putting both the deficits and surpluses together, or the surplus and then the deficit, it makes almost looks like we're trying to balance them out, which we're not in effect trying to do. They're both separate things.
It is why we show them at the activity level, because different activities are funded differently. So, for example, transport is that's the activity which is forecasted to make a higher than budgeted deficit. That's funded through the targeted rate, as well as predominantly the targeted rate bears from bus users as well as NZTA's grants. So it's unlikely that we would be able to go back and ask people to double pay for a bus like that. No, that's not going to happen. So that is going to be a deficit that carries forward to the next year in that activity.
It's broken down a bit more on page 16, which is the activity. So it's got an activity financial summary, which has year to date and forecast. So if you look in the bottom box, so it's the one that's in purple. And if you look in the bottom box, which is the forecast, it's got those activity ones. So if you mentioned the two there, environment, and if you go over into the surplus deficit, environment deficit is going to be 575,000 better.
Yes.
And then below that is safety and resilience is going to be 389. Over to the right hand side, it shows, so that 575, obviously you can see the three activities that make that up, land and water, biodiversity, biosecurity and air. But land and water is general rate funded. So that is actually going to be spending more than what we'd budgeted, or it's going to have a deficit that's higher than what we budgeted. That comes out of general rate. Offsetting that is biodiversity, biosecurity, which is coming out of targeted rates, and that's going to be 930. So they do end up funded out of different things. And if it's targeted rate, anything that is surplus, which that 930 is, just sits in the targeted rate. And when we go to reset rates going forward, we've obviously got that there, and then that rate can get reassessed and either doesn't have to go up depending on what the future spending is, or doesn't have to go up as much as what we thought. The general rate, generally they go into that bucket, and there'll be other things that are offsetting that'll be offsetting that. And you can see within that column across different activities, some are going to create more deficit than what we've forecasted, some are going to create surpluses. And then down in the very bottom, there's the internal, which is largely where the managed fund and interest income is offsetting that. But as Sarah said, the biggest variance individually is in transport, and then that slots over into the targeted rate. So where more or less is, the surplus is greater or less than what we'd forecast, that'll just sit in those transport reserves for targeted rates.
Or let thereof.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Alan?
Thanks. Yeah, on page 8, in fact, section 8, it notes rates, collection, penalty interest is quite a lot higher than the budget. Is there a story behind that one too?
There isn't really a story. So you will remember I bought a rates collection paper to you in December. So that was about how we've gone with our collection. The percentage of penalty which we're charging ratepayers is the same. The increase in the penalty, this is the dollar amount, is the fact that our rates are higher. And so that perhaps wasn't reflected in the budget figure, that our actual overall rates take was higher. So if we had the same percentage of ratepayers that didn't pay, then obviously it just means that we've got higher penalty interest. But I was going to mention this later when we got to the balance sheet, but with the rates collection, as I mentioned in that paper, we are doing mortgage collection, which is just a normal business practice that we do at this time of year on arrears ratepayers. So we have sent out a reminder letter to ratepayers asking them to pay and offering them arrangements to pay. We always err on the side of asking them to make an arrangement with us, to contact us, to try and set up a payment plan so that we can get those arrears rates paid off at a level that they can afford. And then obviously if that's not successful, then we do proceed with other collection measures.
Okay, thanks.
Thomas?
Yes, just a follow-up question from that one. I had that down too, 904,000, well, a variance above the budget of 250 is really significant in terms of that contribution to the bottom line, that surplus that you're showing. It's a concern that, and I know you were explaining it, and it's a concern that a penalty interest rate is actually contributing so much to our surplus at the bottom. And I'm just wondering about the ramifications of, and public perception around that. I don't think it's, to me, it doesn't seem right that we are gaining so much through rates penalty.
So this is the revenue side. So you don't see the expenditure side of us not collecting those rates. So the
Still a variance.
flow on.
It's still a variance of
So this is the variance in the revenue income. So we have higher, obviously, because we've sent out, we have higher costs because of that. So we send a penalty notice out to everybody. The reminder letters get paid for through from that penalty income bucket, because we don't want a person that paid on time to have to then subsidise people that didn't pay on time and require a reminder letter, all of those types of functions. It's not fair that that ratepayer ends up paying for that when they paid their bill on time. And there are, so there's penalty notices, statements that get sent during the year, as well as obviously the reminder letter before we do any debt collection. And also, because we don't have that cash, obviously that then means council we don't budget to have our full cash flow, as the penalty is in line with what we normally have. But because that cash didn't come in the door, we still have to fund our activities. So that has to come from debt funding.
So that's a rather complicated answer to what I was actually asking. The perception that we are creating a cash deficit, a cash surplus from rates penalties is one that I don't think is going to be favourably seen by any of our ratepayers. So, you know, this is a significant variance. We shouldn't have it. We shouldn't be having a variance like this in our rates collection. So it's the canary in the cage sort of thing. What is happening?
Well, what? It's not a cash surplus, because the reason we're charging penalties is because they haven't paid. So they haven't paid their underlying rates, and then we're accruing the revenue for penalties because they haven't paid. The reason why there's a variance is if it's 500,000 is our annual budget for penalties. That got set back in the last LTP. So it's been low, and our penalties have increased over this LTP period as rates have increased. So the percentage of penalties that we're charging, if you remember back to that November finance meeting when we did the rates collection and then what we were striking penalties on, has stayed about the same percentage of our total rates. So that's sort of what we're looking at. We're not seeing a big increase in the amount of in the percentage of penalties. It's just that in relation to our overall total rates, which have been increasing, the amount we budgeted was too low. So we're in the LTP going forward, we've actually increased that. Whether or not, the way we do it is we charge 10%, a 10% penalty. You know, the question is up to council if you wanted to consider that and charge lower, but you probably run the risk that a lot more people will decide not to pay.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it's one of those things, is that the vast majority of our ratepayers pay their bill when it's due. And if you don't penalise the ones who don't pay, effectively you're penalising the ones who do.
Okay, and once again, I mean, it's a question of asking why 5 times. Why is this happening? Why? Okay, so you're saying the rates total's increasing, and so the percentage of penalties is increasing as well. But shouldn't we be looking at trying to bring those penalties down to zero is there any kind of attempt to look at the way we're actually charging rates so that we don't charge penalty interest?
I do think included in some of the population of people that don't pay us, and I'm not saying this is everybody, but we kind of do have three buckets of people that don't pay us. So we have the people that, I don't know how to say this nicely, don't like the Otago Regional Council and refuse to pay rates. It doesn't matter probably what level they were at, it doesn't matter what type of communication we gave to them, they don't pay their TLA rates, they just refuse to pay rates. And those are the people which tend to end up getting paid off through mortgage collection, and the fact that they just refuse to recognise us at all, and these are rates that we need to collect for the services their properties are given. We then have a second bucket of people which tend to be, I don't want to single them out, but tend to be companies or property developers, which the 10% interest rate that ORC is charging is cheaper than second tier lending. So they will deliberately not pay our rates and are happy to take the 10% penalty. For whatever reasons, their other funding sources are more expensive, and that's fine. Like, that's why we've got the penalty, so the people that have paid their rates are not getting penalised. Those people do tend to pay when we send them that reminder letter for mortgage. I've had some that know that it's coming and have paid me on the 31st of January, which is the date just before I could do mortgage collection, the arrears. So it is definitely out there. And then we have the third bucket of people which can't afford to pay or are having financial difficulty. We try and reach out to them. The penalty notice, I don't know if anyone has seen the penalty notice, I think it was circulated last year. It has on it a lot of different payment options. So if people are paying us via direct debit or in arrangements to pay, they're not getting penalised. They're not sitting in that penalty bucket. They've come to us, we've agreed an amount that they can pay, they're paying off their rates, and they are not being penalised over and over and over again. It's just a case of, without that penalty, I don't think we do get people that say to us, you know, I'm not going to pay your rates, I'm going to pay the city council rates. And unfortunately, I think if we didn't have a penalty, I'm not saying it needs to be 10%, but a penalty at some level, ORC's cash would definitely, those payment amounts would definitely drop.
So we have a direct credit option for rates.
A direct debit.
A direct debit, yeah.
Yes, we
We've got
have
multiple.
weekly.
And what sort of promotion do we have around that?
Sure. So that was put on our, we included an insert with our rates notice this year with all of our frequencies for that. So we have weekly, fortnightly, monthly, triannual and annual. The fortnightly one is paid on a Wednesday, and that has been made to match MSD's pension payments, other type of payments that are coming through from central government. So that comes out the day after those payments, which is what people had requested. So we had an insert included in the rates notice that went to every ratepayer. We also have it on our website. From time to time, comms will do some promotion of it, and definitely customer services, when someone calls, it is the first offer if they are having financial difficulty. Would you like to set it up? This is how much it would be on whatever basis, weekly, fortnightly.
Thank you, Sarah. Any further questions on this part? I'll just make a comment on our revenues. A lot of that higher than projected revenue does revolve around timing of those, so we're probably not going to get much more revenue. I'm just looking at Dunedin Bus, Queenstown Bus and Lower Taieri Flood. That's just monies that have come in that are allocated somewhere. So you've had a bit of a jump, but which is very, if you go to 3 though, right throughout the year, we are heading to a forecast improvement on our budget as well. So it's a very good sign. Further questions? You carry through the papers then, Sarah. Good.
So are you okay if I move off the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses for our revenue and expenditure? Yes. Sorry, I just want to confirm that. So into the statement of financial position. So this is the balance sheet of council. So these are the assets and liabilities that we have. We, I suppose, again.
What page, please?
Page 13.
Thank you.
So the largest variance there is our cash, but that is actually, it's due to timing. So we're comparing to 30 June, which is where we have spent all of the ratepayer money which we've received. And so a lot of the difference in the cash is actually caused by our the fact that we only strike rates once a year that's due on the 31st of October. So that's mostly that is what's causing that variance. I'm just kind of running through. There was a movement in borrowings. So you'll see that the related party loan to Port Otago, as well as the borrowings moved between Q1 and Q2, between 30 June and Q2. There was an increase in drawdown from Port Otago, so we on-lent another $7 million to them under their agreement, and the rest of that is just interest accruals. So we accrue interest, and then it's paid. It's about every 3 months that we have an interest payment that's due. So it just depends on the timing of when those loans interest payments, the cash payments were due. Is there any questions about any of the other balance sheet lines?
Look, my probably only one is to Mr. Donnelly is probably around the level of borrowing that we've aligned, or the facility that we have with LGFA for our own cash flow. You're comfortable that that's at a reasonable level to do things right with?
Yeah, but at this point, we've got 25 million borrowed ourselves, and the port is at about low 130 million. They've got the ability to go up to 150. Ours is 25 million, and we're not projecting that we need to increase that borrowing this financial year. But again, that's going into the LTP. There'll be increased borrowing forecast and drawn down through the LTP period.
Thanks, Nick.
Before I hand over to Mike, I'll just quickly go through the Treasury report. So this is the same as what I give you each quarter. So the first graph is our term deposits versus cash. So you will see that we had two term deposits in November and one that was still in place at December. We tend to, currently with the interest rates, cash in for shorter term deposits of about 3 months, because we do go out to the bank and they find the best one in the market for what we need from a cash flow point of view, and that's who we go with. So it just depends on what the market interest rates were. I then have the portfolio performance. So this is the performance of our managed fund with JB Were. So it just splits out the interest, the dividends, the other fees and things from transactions, and the market value movement. So at Q1, the market had quite a bit of a hit and we had made a loss, but that we have regained that back at Q2, and we are looking in a positive position from a gain on investment point of view. There's then there's a graph as well as a table just on the managed fund. So the graph shows you what the actual amount as well as the SIPO amount was. The SIPO amount is the middle target, is what's on that graph for what's in the managed fund. And then it's shown in a table form of what the percentages are. But under the SIPO, we haven't had any breaches in the entire financial year. I don't think we've ever had a breach.
Yeah, Tim.
Just looking at that managed fund portfolio. So looking at the cash amount, at 31st of December, you're showing $4 million there. The SIPO expected amount is $1 million, just over $1 million. Is that not a breach in SIPO?
No, so the SIPO range is 0 to 25%. So the target is 5, but in actual fact, the cash amount is 15%. So it's within the SIPO range of 0 to 25.
So what should that grey amount be?
The grey amount bar will be the 1.3, which is set at the target. So the grey amounts on the graph are the target,
okay,
but
so
they're not the SIPO range, which is in the table.
So what is this graph telling me?
So the graph is just telling you what each of their asset classes are in the managed fund against what the target is for the SIPO. And then below, the table's telling you...
Just on that then, cash, so the target for cash is
1.3 million, yes.
And what we're actually holding in cash is 4 million.
That's correct.
And you're saying that's not a difference?
I'm saying it is a difference, but it's still within the SIPO acceptable range, which is 0 to 25% of the portfolio can be cash.
The grey bar is the midpoint of the range.
Yeah.
So it can out to the side of that box, it has what the acceptable range is. So the 0 to 25. But what I'd have to have a look at, I'm not 100% sure, I can't remember why there was that cash, but you will look, New Zealand fixed interest is low. So it is quite possible that that they had some bonds mature and they were just holding the cash
That's
temporarily.
the answer that I was looking for.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
I mean,
I'm not
that's-
100% sure.
I mean, the picture is there, but the explanation about it being okay wasn't. So, but that's an explanation, thanks, Nick.
It's great, Dan.
It actually still, Tim, if you go to the graph below,
Yeah.
it actually does show that the figure there is within the 0 to 25, where cash can be the SIPO
The
acceptable
table
range.
you're talking about.
The table
Yeah,
is
on the same page.
It can be 0 to 25. They target
Yeah.
5 for cash. And like I said, I'd have to, I can't remember from the quarterly report. But usually when those sort of variances happen, it's usually timing of maturities of, in this case, it would be your bonds, New Zealand bonds that have probably matured and they just haven't flipped them over into invested in a new bond at reporting date.
So a note to that effect would be quite good when there's a significant variance, even though it's within the range, probably a note to say, well, cash held due to bonds, due to bonds maturing and waiting for the next dive into the bonds or whatever would be probably quite handy if it's a significant one. Thank you. Look, before you finish there, Sarah, I just had one question going before I push my button. I'm getting used to it. Going back to page 9 on Dunedin buses, they're 1.647 million above budget expenditure. So I presume that tells us that the Dunedin Bus Reserve will go into a greater deficit. And what are our options to ensure that how do we offset that?
So you will see that I suppose the full story of the transport is that you'll see in the revenue section we are receiving some increased grant money for the buses, but that is not enough to offset our increased expenditure. So overall for the activity, I spoke about, transport is an activity that is forecasted to make a greater deficit than what we had budgeted. There's various reasons for that, but the vast majority is increased contractor costs for the living wage, as well as just increased CPI costs overall. Obviously, as you guys are all aware, it costs you more money to go and fill up with diesel at the moment if you're a diesel driver. So that does have a flow-on effect into the transport cost. Effectively what happens is the transport reserves, that deficit is put into the targeted transport reserve and needs to be funded. It's a part of your LTP discussion on how those deficit reserves will be recovered, in the fact that we don't like to have reserves in deficit, especially from operating, just from an operating point of view, and that's a decision for you to make as part of the LTP.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you. Thanks for that, Sarah. Mr. Rossler,
Right. With the chair's permission.
we'll just push that microphone quite close
Oh,
to.
yeah.
We've had to get this new system for you and Andrew Noon that talk quietly, both of you, so.
Right. With your permission, Mr. Chair, I'll talk to the changes from Q1, just to give you a sense of what where the adverse shifts are signalled. And I'll start from page 23. And that page shows you sort of the high level traffic lighting and the allocation of the targets against those traffic lights, where you've got the donut there on the left, and you've got the in the middle of the page there, you've got on track 67, at risk 4, will not achieve 1, and reporting overdue 4. And that encompasses your entire 76 targets that we report on here. From a comparator back to Q1, the key change is 1 additional yellow, 1 additional at risk, and I'll come to that in a minute. Before I do, I'll just talk to the will not achieve and the reporting overdue. those 5 targets can be explained as really a housekeeping issue, to be blunt. And I will take you to those now. So we'll scroll down and look at the red, which is on page 24. And you'll see that there under regional planning, strategy and urban development. And you'll see that top row there, develop an integrated planning framework that enables well-managed urban growth across Otago. We were reporting yellow and we're reporting red. I'm indicating that's possibly a housekeeping issue because the manager, I think, has been quite tough on themselves there. I think it probably is a yellow, but we'll look to keep it as red. It hasn't been achieved as reported last quarter. I think that when we get to the annual report.
So just for clarity, might be there's a decision made to delay the Queenstown not called FDS, what's called then?
For welfare of FDS.
Yeah, FDS, the equivalent FDS, due to and you remember we brought a paper to write to the Minister to advise that some new data was required and it will definitely be after 30 June. So it will be read for our reporting purposes and we just keep working with QRDC to ensure it's delivered in a timely way, but it'll stay read that one.
Right. So yeah, so there is some delivery occurring, and we can talk to that when we get to the annual report at the end of the year, which is a positive story. The 4 non-reported or reporting overdue, the first one there under governance and community engagement, annual surveys conducted, understanding community awareness. Again, the commentary should have been reported in there is that survey was delivered at the end of last year and has indeed been reported to council, I believe, this cycle. So that should be all green in there. And then moving down into the environment group of targets, and there's three in there that are showing black, are all related to monitoring. You've got your water monitoring, and moving down, you've got your land use monitoring, and then with your air monitoring. And I'll just defer to the GM to confirm that they've likely to be green.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. They are on track. We just missed the reporting deadline for the report.
So the housekeeping issues there is a bit of a process disconnect, so that will be ironed out. Yep.
Kevin, can I?
Yep, Tim, sorry, I just had to pick up your paper.
Right, so just on that, the percentage of data from water monitoring network that is captured quarterly, greater than 95%. How much have we captured? Do we know? Well, obviously not 95%, but anything less than that, perhaps? Do we know?
So through the chair, we do capture quarterly more than 95%. So that will be on track. We just haven't reported it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the just for clarity, Tim, the black means that the data wasn't provided to Mike in time for the report to be updated, not that we're not achieving it. So that's just for us to ensure our processes are there to meet that time frame for Mike for Q3.
Yeah, and actually we could if it doesn't get us revolved. So that's the housekeeping part of it. The at-risk component that I signalled, there's one change from Q1, and that sits under the regional planning, strategy and urban development measure under page 24. You'll see there against the measure information on climate change in Otago shared with community and stakeholders, and that relates to coordination development of the regional sequestration study by December 23. And there's a comment there around why that is possibly yellow, why that's yellow.
I suppose the question there is that process underway and it's just a matter of when it comes back to us?
Yeah, I'd have to defer to a GM around that. I'm not over the detail on that.
Amanda.
Yes, I have to confirm the work has been contracted and they've had their kick-off meeting last week, so it's not well underway, but it is underway.
Thank you.
Right, so I open it up to general questions from that point, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Any questions? Nothing online. 70, without looking back at my figures, 71 of the 76, and good explanations around those that are the one that will not be. It's got a very fair descriptor around why that won't be achieved, and the black markers, those ones that have failed at this stage, are certainly well under control. So if we have comfort with that report, we are probably at the stage where we can move to our recommendation. There's no further questions. No questions online. If not, I can take you back, and we have one recommendation that the committee notes report and the attached activity report and financial performance reports for the period July 1, 2023 to 31st December 2023, being Q2. Someone moving that reason, Councillor Meffin, second by Councillor Kelleher. Oh.
Are they going to speak to that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, yeah.
Yeah, look, I think it's an
Councillor Meffin.
encouraging report that has come through quarterly. It is good to see the forecast surplus, as I've mentioned before. So, the fact that we've got penalty rates that are making up a big portion of that is just a question that was raised. I think that the activity reporting is giving us a good indication of what's happening within this organisation, and I think also that our performance indicator is pretty accurate. I mean, you're 88% achieved, which is pretty good. So, thank you. Yeah,
Senator.
Thank you. Good report as well. And it's very hard midterm or when we're on report 2 and projects are midway through. And so this level of reporting and what we hope is good accuracy is appreciated. Just on the penalty element, in my mind, it's a complete sign of the change in the ORC over the past few years. And those 3 buckets, it'd be really interesting to know whether those 3 buckets in previous years versus what we're seeing this year and in the previous 1 or 2 years are increasing at the level that, you know, exponentially or not. Times are tough out there. And, you know, money just isn't available as it was, and where people saw our rates as being something they could pay as at a relatively small level once a year, has changed for an awful lot of people, and they are funding them over multiple months or having to because, money isn't available as it used to be. So, and we have changed. We are a costlier organisation to run. So, but overall, the amount of green versus the amount of yellow and black almost looks too good in my mind. So whether that's a compliment or whether it's a concern to be raised, it certainly is a positive report. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. And I'm not here to debate SARP, but I may have misconstrued Sarah, and I don't, but she made a comment, and I think I just want to raise it as an issue long term for our council, that we don't want to charge, we can't charge or back charge people for their bus rides. Totally appreciate we can't, except for we've got an accumulated debt now for several years of not covering our costs with transport. And I just want to particularise that because as inequitable as it may sound, we ask people to back pay for the buses. We've got this huge overhanging debt that we need to deal with, and only because it was stated, I want to highlight that I think it's $11 million in reserves, and because those reserves aren't well articulated separately in some of our reporting, that isn't as clear. So we're going to, and I just want to make sure that we're going to be consulting really clearly on the way forward and getting our balanced budget on that. The other one is how we message our expectation that rates money is needed for this financial year to do things versus actually we're accumulating funds in some buckets to do work later on. And again, as we're looking at earnings for our long-term plan and our consultation with our community, I hope that we're highlighting that we only rate people for stuff that they absolutely need to or understand the evening out process, because money is tight in our communities at the moment, more so than 5 or 10 years ago. And I think we just have, I mean, there's always people that find it hard, but there's more finding it hard, obviously, right now. And we just have to be really careful, while we don't want highs and lows and spikes, that we're actually rating for something that's going to happen that year, not something that may be happening. And we're carrying over quite a lot of money in total in these forecast surpluses. So I just wanted to highlight those that I hope that we're going to get better messaging about that, or better processes to ensure we're not operating in 1 year when we're things follow through for the long-term plan. And not criticism of staff, I agree, it's a great report, but they are stuff that we need to be highlighting as ourselves and being much harder on ourselves budgeting wise.
Any further comments? I'd just like to add, look, the report presentation just seems to be getting stronger and stronger and clearer, so that's really, really good. But I'd just like to say to staff that it's critical that governance is aware as soon as possible of any activity or fiscal pressures, and that allows us as governance to make the very best decision to ensure that we can keep the organisation ticking over without those pressures, and we can make the very best decisions around for our ratepayers. So that supporting our staff and supporting our ratepayers and getting those decisions, those pressure points to us as soon as possible, which I'm sure that's happening, but never be shy of coming forward if there are pressures that need our intervention at some stage or assistance. So without further ado, if there's no more debate, would you like to a closing remark? Yes or no? You're happy, comfortable? All those in favour?
Right.
Those against? Carried. Thank you, team. Finance? There not being no further business, we'll declare this meeting closed. Now, the start of our next, is that an advertised start or at the closure of?
Advertised start.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we'll just have to have a wee break.
Lean each other for a few months.
Thank you.
Yeah, last.